Okay, good morning to all of you guys. Happy Tuesday. Today is November the 1st. November the 1st. Happy beginning of the month to all of you guys getting ready for the holidays, for Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. Okay, we have our special guest speaker today. His name is Atwan with Exchange Resources Inc. He'll be going through different ways to speak to investors, centered on exchanges, and many more ideas to when it comes to taxes and everything else. So pretty much without that further ado, I'll give the mic to Mr. Phil Antoine. Phil, welcome, sir. Please give him a round
Thank
of
you. Thank
applause.
you.
Good to have you
I'm
again with us.
honored to be here, and I'm looking forward to a week from this Thursday when Dennis Rosas has it on me on his other blast, part two, I guess. But I'm really honored to be part of your office today. And welcome, everyone. By the way, do you know what yesterday was? Don't tell me Halloween, not to me. You know what it was? It was October 31st, which is 10/31, right? So yesterday was our day for the year. Nobody cares, but I thought I'd bring it up anyway. But today, here we go in November. And by the way, speaking of November 1st today, Freddie, I was looking at my calendar. I'm going to lift it up here. Do you know that as of today, there are 60 days left to 2022? 6-0. That's it.
That's it.
This year is finished. Anything you put into your field or your ground or your farm, any seed you put in will come up next year. Now's the time to be beginning to sow seeds in the ground. You know why? Because I have the feeling you and I are going to want to eat in January and February and March. And if you start planting seeds today, because today I shouldn't even wish you a happy Thanksgiving or a Merry Christmas. What I should wish you is a Happy New Year, because anything you put into the ground today will be harvested next year. And that's why we're meeting here today. I'm not just trying to give you an education on 1031 exchange. I'm trying to give you the methods of finding new people to work with in a changing market. Because the market has changed. Freddie and I were just talking about it, folks. Interest rates have doubled, right? In some cases, even higher than double.
Yep.
And number two, there are less buyers out there than there were before because people are worried. They're uncertain of the future. I'm here to share with you how to work that market for your advantage. And frankly, not just your advantage, but to your client's advantage. Because of all the people I know who have the most amount of money, the vast majority of them own investment property. And as you get to know what that means as investment property, how do you define that? Properties will work for me so I don't have to. It'll make money for me. And I want to talk with you about that today. Because if you learn how to speak that language to an investor, they will listen to you. Your chances of doing business and forming a relationship with them goes far higher than it did before you met them. Because they don't care about you. They care about themselves. And I'm going to talk, they don't care about me. They care about their properties. And what I'm going to talk with you today is how to approach people who own properties as investment. It could be condominiums that they rent out. It could be single families that they rent out. It could be a 2 to 4 unit that they rent out. It could be a 5 unit or higher, or virtually any kind of commercial or industrial type property, depending on what you feel the most comfortable with. The purpose of today is for me to help you start a relationship with people who already own those properties, but they want to do better. They want to advance their financial situation. And when you learn to talk about these things, these three simple things that I'm going to talk with you about today, and integrate it in the process of beginning to meet them, find them, give them information that will benefit them in these three areas, you will begin the process of the seeds going in the ground, and then eventually in 2023, the little shoots are going to come up and grow, and it's going to produce a harvest for you and for them. So everybody wins. So instead of talking about what we're going to talk about, why don't we just start? So this is going to be exciting to me, and I hope for you it will change your career, because I'm telling you, you better be ready for 2023. And if you're waiting for the phone to ring like it has been the last couple of years, it's not going to happen. You have to go out and plant seeds and meet new people. So let me give you the first part of this, the disclosure part. Here's the disclosure. Are you ready for this? You and I are not we're not in the business of giving either legal or tax advice. You and I don't do that. Why? Because you and I are not licensed to give out legal advice, to give out tax advice. But we are here to talk about how to create new relationships with people who already own properties. And the great thing about working with an investor is that, yes, they probably already have their own principal residence. But in addition to owning their own principal residence, they own 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 rentals. And they're out there. They're not, if you don't think they are, you haven't been looking. Your title person that you work with, Freddie, who do you generally support for title? Is it Orange Coast?
Yes, Orange Coast Title.
And who do you work with there?
We use Christy Rye in Downey and Sonia Apodaca in Southgate.
I know them both very well, especially Christy Rye. They will give you a farm package of these people who own these rentals. They'll tell you who they are. They'll tell you where the rentals are located. And if you ask them, they'll give you the records of the people who've owned these properties for 12 years or longer. And these are going to be the perfect people for you to begin the process of putting seeds in the ground of a relationship that will come up. And when it comes up, you'll be in a position to reap the harvest in 2023. So let's talk about the 3 things that matter most to not only the people in those farm packages, for the people in rentals of any kind. And I just want to tell you this. This is really important. If you are just pursuing principal residence only, a sale of somebody's home or the purchase of somebody's personal home, it's a good business to be in. I won't for 40 years. I understand that. But you're missing the boat if you're not talking about the rental properties. Because they bought the rental properties for completely different reasons. And honestly, think about it. If they don't need to sell or buy a principal residence, they don't need you. But they do need you for all the other properties they own because they own them for different reasons. So let's talk about those reasons and how you can integrate those reasons with them and with where they're at. Number 1, you've got to know this part. This is the single most important of the 3 items. This is number 1, numero uno. This is the one that takes precedence above everything else. People buy rentals. Again, it can be a condo, a single family, 2-unit, 3-unit, 4-unit, 5-unit, whatever. Commercial, industrial, because they are motivated to receive a paycheck off of each one of those front doors every single month. As long as it's rented, they want a paycheck. They want to get paid rent. Now, folks, rent is very easy to figure out. If you own a condo or a single family, you get a paycheck. As long as it's rented, you get a paycheck every month. That's the way it works. If you have a 4-unit building with 4 single families, 4 condos, 2 duplexes, whatever, but you have 4 front doors, you get a paycheck in a month on an average of 1 a week instead of 1 a month. If you own 30 units, 30 front doors, you get a paycheck on average, every single day of the month. You get paid 30 times. Does that make sense? That's why people buy investment properties, because they want monthly income. And the way I see it, rents aren't going down. They may be going up some more. And that's why, these people like the government create these things called rent control. Whether you agree with it or not agree with it, it has nothing to do with it. The bottom line is it's going to go up whether there's rent control or not. And here's the bottom line. They expect those kinds of raises over the next several years. So here's the deal. There's two parts of monthly income. And when you learn how to start talking with them about their monthly income, you will get them to start opening up to you all these things that matter most to them, of which you can now talk about. But monthly income is broken into two categories. Two, cash flow and rate of return. Now, in the next few slides, I'm going to get more into what that means, cash flow versus rate of return, and how you can begin to explain to them how to make more monthly income just by tapping into what they already own. Isn't that interesting? We'll see what that means. Number two, but this is number one, monthly income. What's the second most important thing to an investor? That it's worth more in the future, that over time it will appreciate. And that's the bottom line. Most investors look back, and especially when they call me, my client base is all over the United States of America. I get calls from Florida, from New York, from Ohio, Tennessee, Texas, Seattle, Washington, all the way down here to California and everything in between. And they all think the same thing. Not only does income is number one, but number two, they want it to be worth more. And they'll call me up and say, Phil, we need to set up a 1031 tax deferred exchange. And I say, great. And they say, yeah, I bought it for $300,000. I'm selling it for $1 million. And I say, congratulations. You know, good job. But I bet you have a regret. And they say, what's that? I said, I bet you wish you bought at least one more or two more. They start laughing and say, that's exactly right. I wish I had. But I'm willing to ask you today, have you even bought a rental property? Do you own at least one condo or a single family that you rent out, or a duplex, or whatever it happens to be? Because I bet if I can turn the clock back 10 years, 5 years, 20 years, whatever it happens to be, do you know how much more you would be worth today if you had just bought one? That's the way the investor sees it. Folks, I don't care if you think the market's going to go down, because it's going to come back up again higher than it did previously. I've been doing this for 40 years. When I first got into the business, interest rates had just dropped to 8. You think things are tough at 8%? Try selling at 18.5%. It was almost impossible. You would either have to have a seller carryback, an AITD, or a land contract or something, because institutional financing was very unaffordable then. It had just dropped to 18.5% when I came into the business 40 years ago this year. It was 21% the year before. And look how things are changing and the inflation that we're dealing with now. Folks, I guarantee you, with every spike in a market, there will be a downturn. And with every downturn, there's going to be a new spike. People want to own property here in Southern California. As much as everybody complains about the government, that complains about the cost of living here and the heavy taxation, people still want to buy here. People still want to live here, whether you're renting or whether you're owning. So it just makes the values go up even more. And if you don't believe me, I'll just give you one example. Here's the deal. I remember back in 2001 and 2, they had talked earlier in the late 80s and 90s about making the ability to go into a home more affordable to people who did not own their own home. So the government created this thing back in the 90s, something called they called it, I can't believe I can't say it. Well, I'll think of it in just a second. But it's called stated income financing. Back then, you can say whatever you wanted to, and you didn't have to prove how much money you made. You just stated it, and they'll give you the loan. It was amazing. The problem with that is people lied. And when they lied about their income, they were getting qualified for properties they couldn't make a payment on because they didn't make that much money. So what happened? The whole market collapsed, or what they called it back then is the bubble broke. It burst. And people started what? Losing their properties because they could not make the payments. And it brought the values of properties from 2006 as a high crashing down into a foreclosure and the short sale market. It was a horrible time to own, but it was a perfect time to buy. And investors knew that. So what did they do? When you looked at 2008, 9, 10, 11, and 12, those 5 bad years in real estate turn out to be opportunistic times because investors went in and bought those properties and rented them out. And guess what happened? And here we are, 2022. The prices today are higher than they were at the height of the market when they were letting in unqualified buyers through stated income financing. They're higher today than they were then because of all the people that came into the market who didn't qualify, but they got the loans. It forced the prices to go up. Folks, over time, properties will be worth more. Just like in the season where now we're in fall, then winter will come, and then spring and summer will come back again. The same is true with the real estate market. Decade after decade after decade. So here's the bottom line. Over time, property will be worth more than what you paid for. That's the bottom line. So if the market's going down, what an opportunity for you to be connected to investors who want to take advantage of buying more properties as the prices weaken. Number 3, what motivates an investor? Well, we first said income. We said number 2 is it being worth more over time. And number 3, you can write it off. Why is that so important to be able to write off your properties? Is it because, people just want to be rich? Well, everybody, I guess, wants to own properties and have lots of income coming in and properties that are appreciating. But folks, I'm going to break you in. You already know this, but I'm going to tell you about a real reality. You ready for this? I'm glad this is being recorded. Go back and watch what I'm going to say again. The more you make, or the more your clients make, the more the government's going to take. The government is out of control in terms of taxation. And they're going to be targeting, they have been targeting people who make more. What happen to those investors who own property? They're going to get killed on those rents. So way back, the government created something called depreciation. Depreciation, with all the other tax write-offs, we will cover some of them today, is there for the purpose of, look at those boxes on the right side, tax deductions, depreciation, box number 3, to reduce income taxes off the rents you collect. That's what it's there for. You see, the government just doesn't charge you more money in taxes because you made more money as an investor. They're going to charge you higher taxes because the more you make, it's going to raise your tax category. Your tax category will go up. Your tax percentage will go up. It puts you in a higher percentage. So now they're just not taking more from you because you're making more money. They raise the percentage. They put you in a higher tax bracket. Does that make sense? You need write-offs, or the government's going to take 50%, 60%, 70% of what you make because the government wants your money. Now, there's nothing wrong with paying taxes, folks. We need to pay taxes. But the more you make, the more they're going to take. And to some people, that produces a real problem for them because they feel that, just because I invested and took chances, and I didn't go out and do fun things, I went out and bought property and invested. Now I should be able to keep at least 50% of it or more. Well, the government doesn't think that. And they want protection. So let's talk about this, because this is going to make a big difference as you connect with a real estate investor, because this means a lot to them. Number 1, you get to depreciate your property. What does that mean? That means when you buy a property, let's say you bought it once upon a time for $300,000. You can't buy anything for $300,000 now. But if you back then, if you bought it, your CPA would separate your $300,000 purchase price into two categories: land value and improvement value. Improvement is the building, roughly the value of that. So out of that 300,000, a part of it would be dedicated to land, the other part would be dedicated to the building or the capital improvement, as the government would call it. You get to write off the capital improvement over the time that you own the property. So if you own the property for, let's say, 30 years, you get to write off, if it's a residential, look at the lower left-hand bottom part, you get to write it off for 27 and a half years. So your CPA will take the value of the building, of your residential building or the commercial building, it doesn't matter, and divide it by 27.5 if it's considered a residential building. Or they'll divide it by 39 if it's considered a commercial building. And you could write it off for all those years as long as you own it, which reduces the amount of taxes you will pay off the rent you will collect. Does that make sense? It's a tax write-off. And it's a wonderful thing. In fact, when you put a capital improvement into a building, you know what a capital improvement is? It's not paint, it's not carpet, it's not a repair. It's an upgrade, something that you do for your unit or your building. For example, remodeling bathrooms, upgrading them, or upgrading kitchens. Or it could be, getting rid of the windows and putting in those double pane, energy efficient windows. Whatever it is you do, or add on to the building, whatever it happens to be. Any money you put into the building as a capital improvement, right, is allowed to have another layer of 27 and a half years or 39. And you can just take these write-offs because you need to reduce the amount of taxes that you pay off the rent you collect, because the government, okay, don't get mad at me, but I'm going to tell you this. The more you make, the more they take. And that's just the way it is. I can prove it. Let's talk about you. It's November. Well, guess what you're going to do in April of next year? You're going to file a tax return. And you're going to be looking for every single write-off you can find. So you would have to pay less money in taxes. That's the way it works. It's legal, as long as you don't cheat or lie. I mean, it's a good thing. The government lets you do this. It's an incentive for you to make more. Is for the agent, or for the exchange person, or the title person, or the escrow person, whoever. And the bottom line is, they're giving you incentives. You know what else you can write off? The interest, the property taxes, the insurance. You go visit the property, you get to write off your mileage. I was speaking in Beverly Hills last month, and this agent told me, I've been buying new properties and doing exchanges. He said, I've been using your company, and we've been doing exchanges in Las Vegas. He said, now I can go to Vegas and write off at least the mileage of the whole trip. So the bottom line is, this is an important item to an investor because it reduces the amount of taxes they pay off the rents they collect. And there you go. These, my friends, are the three most important items to a real estate investor. The people that you're already calling on, but you may not even know that they own rentals, or you haven't had any time or never thought about calling on people who own residential real estate or commercial, if that's what you want to do, as investment. These are the three things that matters most. And if you don't start asking questions about these three items, they're not going to tell you any answers. They're not going to give you any extra information. Does it make sense? And frankly, they don't care if you work for Berkshire Hathaway or how good you are. They don't care about me or I'm with Exchange Resources. They care about these three items of their portfolio of investment real estate. So here's the question. How do you formulate a relationship with people that think that way? And basically, folks, my friends, everybody who owns investment real estate thinks this way. So how do you help them make more? How do you endear yourself to them, beginning now with only 60 days left in 2022, so you can get a head start to 2023, because it's going to You'll be taking down the Christmas tree before you know it. You'll be watching the New Year's Day football games before you know it. And you have this opportunity now to plant seeds over the next 60 days. So how do you, in the yellow box, get more, how do you get their rentals to do better? And I'm going to show you how to do it right now. You ready for this? This is really important. Let's pretend each one of you own two properties on the left. One is in red, one is in blue. The property A and property B, you own both of them. And let me tell you a little bit about these properties you own. Property A and property B are the exact same square footage with the exact same floor plan, with the exact same lot size, in the same condition that you bought 12 years ago or longer. Got it? 12 years ago or longer. There's a reason why I tell you that. Because when you talk, if you choose to work with your title person and order a farm package, you will now want to work with the people who've owned these properties for 12 years or longer. Why? Because there's equity in the buildings. And by the way, these two properties that you bought, you know, same month of the same years, 12 years ago or longer, let me tell you something about these two. They're next door to each other. They're side by side. They're on the same street in the same city. There is absolutely no difference between A and B. None. Except for one thing. Property A has more equity than B. Why? They're identical. They appreciated the same. So why would A have more equity? Maybe you refinanced B. Maybe you took equity out. You had a line of credit. Maybe you did more principal pay down on A for whatever reason. The reason doesn't really matter. What matters is you own them both and they're identical properties next door to each other and you bought them at least 12 years ago or longer because you closed escrow in the same month of the same year of both these properties. So let's talk about the three things we've been talking about in the last few minutes: income, appreciation, and tax write-off. Let's go to the middle box in orange, income. Remember I said in the next few slides we're going to be talking about the differences of what income is. It's cash flow versus the rate of return. So let's talk about that right now. Let's talk about cash flow because that's part of the income. Cash flow is how much money you get to keep every single month off that rent check. So here's question number one. How many think, or who thinks, which property is giving you better cash flow? Remember, A has more equity, B has more debt. All right? So there's very little debt or no debt on A. Property B, so which property will generate more cash flow? Did you say property A? Because there's less debt on it, which means you have very little debt service or no debt service to a lender. If you said that, you're right. You pinned it. That's a perfect scenario. That's why some people like to pay off their properties. So now they don't have to make the rent. I recently just paid off my home. The last 2 months, I haven't had to write a big mortgage check to the lender. It's been a pretty good feeling. In fact, I've noticed my checkbook is a little more plump because I'm not making those house payments anymore. That's a perfect scenario for rental property. Now stay with me, this is really important. If you are retired. You see, when you're retired, you need as much income or cash flow to survive this month and the future. Because you need that rent to pay for groceries, to go out to dinner, to go out and travel and do everything you want to do as a retired person. It makes sense after you retire to pay off property A. It makes total sense. Plus you get to keep more of the cash because you're not paying those rent checks, like I said. I mean, not the rent, but the mortgage checks. So property A is a good place to be if your hair is my color. Well, I'm not retired yet, but I think you get my gist. If your rentals are paid for, it makes sense. But which property gives you a higher rate of return that you get each month based on the amount of equity that's in it. Do you understand that question? That's a really important question. You see, they're both going to have the same amount of expenses. Property taxes are going to be the same. Insurance is going to be the same. Maintenance is going to be the same roughly. They're identical properties. So considering how much equity is in A versus how much equity in B, which equity is giving me more? This might surprise you. It's property B by a long shot. See, if you put all the equity in property A in the bank, you'll get an interest rate for it. If you put property B in the bank, you'll get an interest rate for it. The interest rate is what you're earning. But my question is this: based on rent, which property is going to give you more? It's going to be B. Why? Because I can't charge more rent on A because I have more equity. I want to say that again. That is so important. I can't charge more rent on A because it has more equity. B, that has a lot less equity, will be charging the same amount of rent because they're identical properties. They're on the same street in the same city. They're the same floor plan. They're next door to each other. Rent is not predicated on how much equity you have in a building. It's based on fair market. So folks, B is going to give you a higher rate of return, even though it has, maybe not in dollars, but in interest return. Interest being the income that's being generated by it, because it has less equity, which means A needs to, look at the bottom yellow on the right side, to re-leverage for growth. It needs to have more front doors that will pay them rent. So if you either borrow or sell A to get more doors that'll make you rent, you're going to start eventually making more money because you're getting paid more often. Now, if you don't believe me, you should come to some of my investor seminars and listen to the stories of people who are investors. You know what they did? They either borrowed out of A or they sold A to buy more properties. And they did that over and over again. Today, they're sitting on multiple units. They're getting paid once a day, or they're getting paid every other day, or they're getting paid, 2-3 times a week. Does that make sense? Because they have more doors that are paying them income. So it's okay to pay off your property when you retire, but beforehand, your rate of return is going down. And I want you to remember this. This is so important. The higher the equity, the lower the rate of return. I'm going to say it again. The higher the equity, because you can't charge more rent because you have more equity. Your equity is getting lazy and it can't charge more because you've topped it off. You need to re-leverage. And that's what people do to make money in real estate. Number 2, which property will appreciate faster, A or B? If you said A, you're wrong. If you say B, you're wrong. They will appreciate at the identical amount because they're identical buildings next door to each other in the same neighborhood. Folks, equity growth or appreciation has nothing to do with how much equity you have in the building currently. It's based on the market value and what comps are doing for that particular type of property. And they're both identical properties. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really important to know that B is going to give you a higher rate of return on equity because it can have the same equity appreciation growth as A, but I don't have as much invested in it. Does that make sense? That is so important to know. So far, unless you're retired, B is the better way to go. Let's look at number 3, tax deductions. Which property that you own of these two gets higher tax deductions? Well, they're both going to be pretty equal, except for one, because they're identical. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance to the building, HOA fees if that applies, whatever, all the stuff that you have to pay for. They're about equal because they're identical properties. But property B has something that property A has very little of or none. You know what that is? Interest write-off. That reduces the amount of income tax they have to pay off the rents they collect. Did you get that? It reduces the amount of tax they have to pay, income tax, that they're going to have to pay when they sit down with their CPA and put down all the rents and what they collected for the year. A will pay less than B because it has more interest write-offs. Folks, I hope this will impress you, because as your clients begin to take a look at this, you know what they're going to say? Well, I bought this property for this and now it's worth this. I wish I had bought more. My rents used to be here, but now they're here. I wish I had more units that were paying me rent. But why should I sell if it's now rents are here and values are here? The answer is it's time to re-leverage, even in a depreciating market. Not that it's happening that much, but as property values go down, it's time. Yes, what you're selling is going to be worth less, but it's time to re-leverage the equity so you have more doors that are paying you rent. You have more properties that are going up in value. If you have all your equity in A and very little in B, and a market comes up and you've diversified, you have more buildings, they're all going to go up when the values go up. And number three, you have more tax write-offs now. The government works for you that way, and that's the way it works. So if I sell the property, well, I pay taxes. If I'm going to re-leverage, because there's two ways of doing it. You can borrow, refi, take money out, and buy another rental building or multiple unit building. Or number two, or a commercial or industrial building, whatever it is you like. Or number two, you can sell the property, but when you sell, you have to pay taxes. Now remember we said at the beginning, in fact I said it on the bottom here in the lower right hand corner, red type highlighted in yellow. This is not for tax information for you to give to your clients. I just want to give you a taste or a flavor of what their CPA is going to do for them, or your CPA is going to do for you when they calculate, when you sell a property, how much you pay in taxes. Now, boy, the time's going by fast. I just looked at the clock. We only have till about 11:30 or so to keep it today. So let me get to this really fast. When you sell a building, it doesn't matter if you're principal residence, your second home, your vacation home, your business use properties, or your rentals. That's pretty much it. That's everything. And here's the bottom line. Your CPA is going to use a formula that tastes like this. They're going to take number one, the sales price. They're going to subtract number two, what they call the adjusted basis, from that. And number three is the gain that you will pay tax on, and it has nothing to do with what you have in the building. Nothing at all. It's based on capital gain. That's why it's called capital gains tax. That's why you see the government always fighting. Democrats, Republicans, independents, whatever. They're all fighting each other. How much should we pay for capital gains tax? So that same is true applies to stocks and bonds and mutual funds and all kinds of other investments. They want you to pay tax when you sell. To refinance, there's not a tax. To sell, there is a tax. So this is what they're going to do. So if this was your principal residence, the sales price, number one, if you sold it for $1 million, but you bought it for $300,000, your CPA will add in any capital improvements that you put into the property. Remember, we said it creates more depreciation, and what it does basically, it raises your basis. So if you paid $300 for the property and you put $100,000 into it, it's now $400. So $1 million minus $400 equals $600. See number three? It wouldn't be $700, it would be $600. So you pay taxes now on $600 as opposed to $700,000. Does that make sense? But if it's a rental, you get to depreciate it. But they make your CPA deduct the depreciation off that basis. So it actually shrinks, which is bad. But you'll pay more taxes as they shrink it. Then when you go to sell it, they have to hire you. They have to hire an escrow company. They have to hire a title company. They have to pay transfer taxes and recording fees. And they have to pay 1031 exchange fees if that's what they're going to do. And then the bottom line is that will factor into the $300,000 basis. So the sales price minus the $300,000 basis, or whatever it happens to be, whatever it's adjusted to at that time, equals number 3, the gain in rent. That's if it's a rental property. What if it's a second home or a vacation home? Same thing. The sales price minus the adjusted basis. Depreciation, again, is not included because on your personal residence or a second home or a vacation home, you cannot depreciate those. Equal the capital gain. Now, if this was your principal residence and you're married and you've owned it for at least 2 years, it's called a 121 principal residence exclusion. If you've lived in it 2 out of 5, the CPA will give you off, or the government will give you off the $700,000 of gain, up to $500,000 if you're married filing a joint return, or $250,000, but the rest of it you pay in taxes. So if you're married, 700 minus 500 up to 500 gives you 200,000. So I would pay taxes on $200,000 on the sale of my home. If I was single, they'd only give me $250,000 because there's 2 people, 250 twice is 500. So that means that I would pay taxes on $450,000 after they took the 250 off the 700. If it was a second home or a vacation home, I get 0 off of it because it's not my principal residence. I would pay taxes on $700,000. If it's a rental, unless I do a 1031 exchange, I would pay taxes on $700,000. I think I just heard somebody say, so what are those taxes? What are the percentages? Let's show you. It's very important. Today, this is what it costs. You would pay to the IRS between 15 and 20% in something called long-term capital gains taxes on, if it's your principal residence, 700 minus 500 equals 200, or 700 minus 450 if you're single off 250 if you're single equals 450. This is what you would pay to the IRS. Same thing would be 100% on your second home, vacation home, and if you didn't do a 1031 exchange, you would pay 15 to 20% off the long-term capital gains tax. Now people call me up and say, Phil, I understand that, but here's the deal. I'll just pay the capital gain and be done with it. And I say, I'll just pay the 15 or 20%, and that's it. I'm done. I say, excuse me? What do you mean the 15 or 20%? I said, that's just one tax. There are other taxes that you pay when you sell those rentals or your personal home or your vacation home. They said, what other taxes? You have to pay number 2. Number 2 is called the Medicare, the health care, the Obamacare, the affordable health care. I don't care what you call it. This tax has to be paid when you sell your principal residence, your second home, your vacation home, your business use, or your rental properties. So if your gain is at least $200,000 or more on your property that you're selling, you will pay an additional 3.8%. Or you will pay, if that's 200 or more if you're single. If you're married, it's 250 or more of gain, you will pay the extra 3.8%. That's number 1. Oh, I'm sorry, that's number 2. Number 1 is 15 to 20% on the long-term capital gain. Number 2 is the Medicare tax, healthcare tax, and that just raised your tax to between 19 and 24%. Number 3, you have to pay a tax to the state of California. I was born here. I was born in the city of LA. I've always lived in LA County. That may change in the future, but for now, I still live here. LA, or California, is the number 1 tax state in the country. Our taxes here are higher than New Jersey or New York or Pennsylvania or any other state you can possibly think of. When you sell this property, in addition to paying the 15 to 20%, in addition to paying the 3.8%, you have to pay to the Franchise Tax Board of the state of California between 9.3 to 13.3% tax. All of a sudden that profit is going bye-bye. That's number 1 and number 2 and number 3. are for your principal residence, your second home, your vacation home. But if you're selling a rental or a business use property and they've given you the opportunity to depreciate it, and whether you take the depreciation or not, you have to pay a fourth tax. It's called number 4. It's a 25% tax on the recapture of depreciation. That's a lot of money, folks. And if you didn't take the tax write-off of depreciation on a business use property or a rental, the government says it's okay, but you still have to pay the tax on what you could have taken, whether you took it or not. And this is what you pay when you sell a piece of property. Do your clients ever talk to their CPAs? Do they know what they're getting into when they sell a piece of property? So what's a 1031 tax deferred exchange? A 1031 exchange is the ability in 1921, and that's when the government created this, over 101 years ago, to be able to sell your rental or your business use property and to buy a replacement property so you can defer the tax. Now, it's not tax free, it's tax deferred. What does that mean? That means the basis of what you paid for it that was adjusted, all the gain in it goes with you to the next property. And you don't have to pay all the taxes that we just went over. It's deferred. Why? Because it lets you re-leverage the equity to buy bigger, better properties for you so you can have more doors. It allows you to diversify so you have more to appreciate with. It lets you take your investment dollars to other states if you want to buy in places like Texas or Florida or Tennessee or North or South Carolina or Arizona or Nevada or Colorado or Oregon or Idaho or Montana. Folks, these people are going all kinds of places with their investment property. And they need a listing agent who will help them do that so they can go into better properties that will generate more income for them and create better tax write-offs that are also appreciating in other places. This is why investors do 1031 tax deferred exchange, so they can go into new, better property for them. Well, won't I eventually pay the tax when I sell the property for that last time and then I cash out? The answer is yes, absolutely. You're going to go all the way back to property number 1 because you brought that basis with you and the gain from property to property. So if you originally bought when you're in your, let's say, your 30s and now you're in your 80s and you decide to cash out, that basis of 300 and now it's worth, let's say, 3 million. 3 million minus 300 is a $2.7 million gain. If that's the case, you will pay all this off the sale. So why should I ever exchange in the first place? Because the government says not only are you able to defer the tax and not pay it and use that money to buy more property, but if you have this in a trust, I want to go over that vehicle right down all the way to red on the bottom. Your clients must consult their tax professional or estate planning attorney for more details and alternative methods. But a trust is a really good example. Let's say this was me and I bought for 300 and now it's worth 3 million and I have it in a trust. And the day I pass and I go home to go see the Lord, guess what's going to happen, folks? My heirs will receive this property because of my trust. But the basis that is I took with me from property to property is stepped up to the fair market value of that property the day I died. Do you know what that means? That means your clients will give this property because of their death through this trust to their heirs, not at a $300,000 basis with a huge capital gain. No, they receive it at the fair market value the day they died. Do you know what that means? The heirs will receive it, the surviving spouse. The heirs will receive the property at a stepped-up basis, which means they can turn around and sell the property and pay no taxes. In our industry, we have a saying for this. It's called swap till you drop. And that's really what it means. Folks, did you know the federal government gave you this gift in 1954? That was 68 years ago this year. The government tried to eliminate it. The White House tried to eliminate it last year. Thankfully, the House of Representatives said, no, we're going to keep this stepped-up basis. It's important for people to have a exit program, or the heirs not to inherit these huge capital gains that they're going to have to sell it and get killed on taxes. That's your government working for you right there, folks. So which properties qualify for a 1031 exchange? There's only one. It's called, all the way on the left, investment real estate. That's in green. That's the only property that qualifies for a 1031 exchange. That's it. But how do you define investment real estate? And so many people get this wrong, but I want you to get this. There's only 3 definitions of investment real estate. Number 1, oh, by the way, these 3 definitions have nothing to do if the property's residential or commercial or industrial. It has nothing to do with that. It's only if, number 1, it's held for income. So it doesn't matter if it's residential, commercial, industrial, manufacturer. It doesn't matter what the use code is. It doesn't matter what the zoning is. If you charge rent and you receive that rent every month for the last 2 years, sometimes you don't get rent because tenants move out and they'll be vacant for a little while. You get a new one in, or if somebody stops paying rent, you have to evict them. The government gets that. But if you've had a pattern on your tax return showing rent for the last 2 years, you qualify for a 1031 exchange. How do you like that? Again, it has nothing to do with this manufacturer zone, if it's industrial, commercial, or residential. It's simply charging rent and declaring that rent on the tax returns. That's one option of the definition of investment real estate. What's the second one? The second one is you use it for your business. You're an owner user. It doesn't matter if it's a restaurant building, or if it's a laundromat building, or if it's a gas station or a car wash building. It doesn't matter if it's a retail building. It doesn't matter if it's even a residential building. Like, for example, I've seen people take their residential buildings and, let's say, State Farm or Farmers Insurance converts it because it's on a big street, though it's a residential building. They convert it into a place that they do business in. They are an owner user of that building. That qualifies as long as you've held it in your business and utilize your business out of that for the last 2 years, last 24 months. So number 1, income property. Number 2, owner user business use property. And believe it or not, number 3 qualifies for investment real estate. Vacant land. Don't you wish you had bought vacant land, even though it didn't produce income for the most part, in a city that ends with the word beach? Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, Redondo Beach, Huntington Beach, Laguna Beach, Sunset Beach, New on. But even if it's not at a beach, if you bought vacant land and just held it for investment, even in the desert or the mountains, and it's worth more today, the government will allow you to do a 1031 exchange. And these are the only 3 properties that qualify for the exchange. So now the government says you have to go back into a life like in kind property. So what does that mean? So if I'm selling a residential income producing condominium and I sell it and I want to do an exchange, I want to buy vacant industrial land. Is that like kind? Most people say no. The government says yes. Why? Because what you're selling has to be one of these 3. But to go back into any one of these 3 is allowable. So you don't have to go residential to residential or commercial to commercial or improved to improved or unimproved to unimproved. You can go into any one of these 3 that you're selling, into any one of those 3 that you're buying. It doesn't have to be the same. It just has to be investment real estate that you're selling, and you're purchasing investment real estate as we just defined it. Anywhere in the United States. You are not limited to California. You can go anywhere in the country. A lot of people ask me, well, if I own property in another country like Mexico or Canada or in the Middle East or wherever it happens, in Europe, and I'm a full-time resident or I'm a citizen, can I exchange into the US? The answer is no. The government says that when you do a 1031 exchange on this investment real estate to investment real estate, it has to be US property to US property, period. But if you own property in other countries, like Mexico, and you want to exchange it into another country, like Canada or Israel or somewhere in Europe, Africa, anywhere, so you can do foreign for foreign, it is allowable. Or domestic for domestic, but you cannot mix the two together. The government will not allow you to do that with a 1031 exchange. So what is not allowable in a 1031 exchange? You can't, your principal residence, you live there. It's for personal use, a second home, a vacation home, the business of the business that you're selling. So if you're selling a retirement center, all right, where you take care of older people with disabilities or whatever, all the beds, the furniture, all the equipment, the goodwill of the business. Same is true for the gas station or a car wash or a restaurant. All the stuff that applies just to the business cannot be exchanged. The building can, because it's used for business. You're an owner user, but the actual business opportunity portion is not exchangeable, and that's the way it works. That makes sense? What about a principal residence? What if I own a multiple unit property? Let's say I own a 4-unit building. I live in one of the units. Well, on the unit that you live in, the government will give you up to $250,000 or up to $500,000 under the 121 principal residence exclusion, but only for the gain of the unit that you live in. What about the other units? You can do a 1031 exchange because those units have been separated on your tax return showing rent and depreciation. So guess what? You could exchange the value of the other three and take the 121 principal residence exclusion on only the unit you live in. And so you can do both. And the government will let you do it. What else won't the government typically let you do in a 1031 exchange? Generally speaking, it's flipping or developing. Some CPAs can find a way to justify it. Most feel they don't qualify for an exchange. They should talk to their CPA, not you or me. Okay, let's talk about the logistics here. Now we have to shift gears. Number one, how do I set up a 1031 exchange? Because you have 60 days left. You contact your title person. I will mail you. I will email you. If you send me an email, I have up to 20 different letters that deal with all of this topic that we were just talking about. From what's like kind to how a 1031 exchange, and some of the stuff I'm going to talk about, releveraging the equity to have more doors for better appreciation and tax. I will provide those letters to you if you do two things. You will promise me you will use them and send me an email. That's it. I'm going to send them to you. They are yours to put into the ground as seed in the next 60 days into 2023 with new investors that you can start making a relationship with. So you're taking a listing and you find out there's tenants in the property. You want to ask your client a couple of questions. In fact, I'm going to have something to drink here. A little water calms the throat down, I think. With these throat lozenges, I do okay, I guess. Question number one, why are you selling the property? Number two, what do you plan on doing with the money? Why would you ask them, why are you selling the property? And what do you plan on doing with the money? Oh, it makes all the difference in the world, folks. Why? Because number one, they're going to have a capital gain, especially if they've owned it for at least a couple of years or longer. They're going to have, the longer they own it, the bigger the gain is probably going to be. That's why you want those farm packages of people who've owned those rentals for 12 years or longer. That's number one. Number two, not only will they pay a capital gain, but maybe what they were planning on doing is re-leveraging the sale into more doors, bigger, better properties. Why? Because the higher the equity, the lower the rate of return. And maybe it's time to leverage to create more doors or more properties that are going to appreciate, right? Everything we've just talked about over the last hour. So they're in. They want to do a 1031 exchange. They talked to their CPA. The CPA definitely recommended it. What do you have to do now as a real estate agent? Do you know there's responsibility on your shoulders as well? And here it is. So please pay attention to this. You have to make sure that your client hires an accommodator or a qualified intermediary. There's lots of different names. Accommodator, qualified intermediary, a facilitator, a straw person. There's all kinds of names that they call our industry. But you have to hire a company that does this. A company like ours. You may not use my company, you may use somebody else's. But you need to hire a company like ours. And we have to go to escrow. In fact, if you look all the way on the bottom in red on the right hand side, it says the exchange must be set up by us before any escrow closes. I got one of these cell phones like you. I get a lot of calls during the day. I put it on do not disturb now because I'm speaking with you, so I don't see all these texts coming and these phone calls coming in. It's all going to voicemail. Do you know how many calls I get a week? At least 2 or 3, where people call me up and say, Phil, it already happened like already this week, yesterday. I closed escrow on Friday. I need to set up a 1031 exchange. The answer is, I'm sorry, you can't. You've already closed escrow. It's already become taxable. The egg has been opened up and scrambled. You can't put it back the way it was before. It's over. The exchange must be set up. So what do you need to do to help your client? Well, the first thing you need to do is when you take the listing, you want to go into your agent's private remarks, right, in your listing. And you want to put in there something to effect that the seller is doing a 1031 tax deferred exchange and the buyer to cooperate at no cost to the buyer or no tax liability to the buyer. That's all you have to put in. But that's only for the listing. Why would you even put language like that in? Because you have to bring us into escrow. Now, just what you put into your MLS agent's remarks, it's just an announcement. It's not a contract. The contract comes from the CAR zip forms that you see right there. There's 2 of them. One is called the seller's intent to exchange, also known, you may want to take a picture of this, the SXA form. The other one is when you go to buy your replacement property, wherever it is, anywhere in the country or right here in California, the buyer's intent to exchange zip form. These need to be involved. These are your CAR form. This is what the SXA form is. It allows us or your accommodator to go into escrow to set up the exchange on behalf of your seller or one of your, if they're tenants in common as an example. We'll try to touch on that a little later if we have time. But I got to tell you this. The bottom line is number 4 is very important to you. It's called failure of exchange. Because you can put contingency language to extend the escrow if you negotiate this up front, which will allow your seller to extend escrow. For what reason? You'll find out in just a minute. But I'll tell you, I'll give you a little hint. Once the sale closes, the government only gives you 45 days maximum after escrow closes to name the address of what you're going to buy. You can name up to 3 properties. But what if you can't find the right property? Or you got outbid? or the seller changed their mind, or you got an inspection report and it was a disaster. You're not going to buy that property. Your seller's not going to buy that property. The second they close, starts the 45 days. This language you can put, this contingency language that you can put in, and this zip form will give you some options. You can even write in your own under additional terms like number 6, where you can put down contingency language that says the seller reserves a 30-day extension to escrow in the event that they're not in escrow on a purchase, and approve a physical inspection report, or even the title approval of the title, a prelim. Because what if they find out there's issues like IRS liens, franchise tax board liens, there are clouds on the title of ownership, there's some things that they're not sure they can close a purchase in time. You'll find out in a minute. You only have 180 days to close the purchase. And you say, I'm going to extend the escrow because I agreed to do that, because I disclosed that to you and you agreed to do so. So the bottom line is, the seller's intent to exchange form is so important to you. And when you go to buy, you use the buyer's intent to exchange the form. What is that? That means that I'm buying your property, I'm part of a 1031 exchange. I am bringing in my accommodator who will not only put in the language for this exchange to set up documents so I can defer my taxes from my sale into my purchase, but they're holding my money as well, of which they will gladly give you a verification of funds letter to prove how much money they're holding on my behalf. Does that make sense, folks? That's what these two forms do. They're very important to you. Now, let's talk about the timing issues of your 1031 exchange. Tick, 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 tick. The second you close your sale, the timing begins. Now, there's lots of different exchanges that you can see in the blue box on the left. We don't have time for that today, but we do have time to talk about the two exchanges that most people use. What I'm going to show you, 97% of all the exchanges you will ever see are based on two different exchanges. And the one has more than the other. Here's the one that's more than the other. It's called a delayed exchange. What is a delayed exchange? The delayed exchange says that, from the time your sale closes escrow, you have 180 days. That's not 6 months, by the way. It's a little less than 6 months to close your purchase. And if the 180th day lands on Thanksgiving, Veterans Day this month, those are two holidays, or if it lands on a weekend when the county recorder is closed, guess what? You don't get an extension on the 180 days. You have to close on that day or before. There's no next business day. It's 180 calendar days that begins the close of your sale escrow, the property you're selling. So that's number one. Number two, in a delayed exchange, not only do you have 180 days to close at the latest what you're going to buy with no extensions. Number two, you only have the first 45 days, just like I told you just a couple minutes ago, to name the address or identify the address of the property you're going to buy. That's why you want to use that zip form, because you may need a 30-day extension, a 45-day extension, a 60-day extension. But remember, your client will release the contingency after they get into escrow on the purchase, once they've gotten a physical inspection report and they approve it, and they approve a prelim. Then you drop the contingency and you close the sale. So the lender knows for the buyer of the property you're selling, escrow knows, everybody knows, including the buyer. So the bottom line is, can you identify in those 45 days? Well, you can change the identified properties in the 45 days 150,000 times, but not after day 45. If you do a 1031 exchange, well, guess what? You only have the first 45 days of that 180 days at the end of that time period to have up to 3 properties on your list. You can buy any one of those 3 properties. Some people like to diversify. They want to buy 2 of those properties. Some want to buy all 3. It doesn't matter. We'll go over that you have to buy for equal or greater but I'll get into that in just a minute. For this point, you need to know you have to have at least one property on the list, but it's suicidal if you do, because what happens if you pass day 45? Now you can't change the list, and that property's not going to work out for you. You're in trouble. Your client's going to pay taxes. So it's really important to know. You've got to know what you're going to buy really before you close your sale. But if you don't, you still have another almost month and a half, 45 days to name, and you can buy any one of your identified properties or more than one of them if that's what you like to be, and they could be anywhere in the country. What about, and by the way, the delayed exchange that we just discussed, 80 to 85% of every 1031 exchange in the entire country, especially here in California, is going to be this, a delayed exchange. 10% of them are going to be reverse exchanges. What is a reverse exchange? In gold in the upper left-hand corner on the left side in dark blue, here's the question. Can I close a purchase first and then close the sale? The answer is yes, if you do a reverse exchange. We have to be part of this purchase, and we have to set up the reverse exchange. We also have to be a part of the sale. You know how many phone calls I get every month where people say, well, you know, I closed my purchase because I found a great deal and I closed it, and now I'm selling my property. I'd like to set up an exchange on the property I already bought. The answer is no. The government will not let that happen. We have to be part of both the purchase and the sale, or in this case on a reverse exchange, yeah, I just said it, the purchase and then the sale. We have to do things like, if you look on the lower right hand box in gold, you have to have money to get into a purchase first. Where's that money going to come from? You haven't closed the sale yet. So you're going to have all cash or cash and a loan. And you'd be surprised how many people can qualify for some cash and a loan, like a swing loan or bridge loan, a line of credit, hard money. There's all kinds of ways of getting a lender to lend you the money to close the purchase first with your minuscule down payment. And then you can close the sale up to, just like before with the delayed exchange, 180 days later. Now, you can't just take title to your new purchase and have title to the property you're selling. The government won't let you do that. We have to take title to one of those two properties. And we have to hold it, if you look at the second bullet point in gold on the right-hand side, in something called an EAT. What does that stand for? It stands for Exchange Accommodation Title Holder. The federal government makes us set up a holding entity. We use a corporation that we will set up non-commingled with anybody else's property for the sake of taking title to either your purchase of the new property or the day before you close the purchase, the property you're selling. We'll take one of those two. And the lender will usually dictate which property we're going to hold in this reverse exchange. Now, if that's the case, and the lender says, sorry, we're not going to lend you the money, and then the accommodator is going to take title to you, to the property, then we will take title to the property you're selling the day before you close your purchase. That's when day 180 starts ticking. You've identified what you're going to buy because you're going to go into escrow in it, but we will take title to the one you're selling the day before you close your purchase. Usually, you have to go in all cash for us to take title to the purchase. So the 180 begins one day earlier on the reverse exchange if we are taking title to the property you're selling the day before you close your purchase. And that's what a reverse exchange is. We're going to pass some of this stuff up because we don't have time for it today. In the last 10 minutes that we have together today, what are the monetary requirements in a 1031 exchange? In other words, how much can I buy, or can I keep any cash? Do I have to borrow again? What does the government require for me to do? Well, there's two basic requirements. Requirements number one, the investor must reinvest all the proceeds from the sale into the purchase. Number two, if you're paying off loans or debt, you are required to reborrow the same amount or more when you buy your new property. If you don't accomplish both of them, you'll pay taxes on the difference you didn't accomplish. Your exchange still may go through, but you will still pay some taxes. So let's go into the details of this. Now there's two kinds of closing costs. One's called recurring, that's in red on the bottom, or non-recurring, that's in light blue on the top. What's the difference between the two? A recurring is something that you pay on a regular basis. Property taxes, that's a recurring, insurance of the building, HOA fees, maintenance. These are all ongoing recurring costs to the property. A non-recurring is a one-time allowable cost specifically for the purpose of selling the property. Here are the non-recurring costs to sell. You may want to take a picture of this page. Commissions, that it's a non-recurring cost to sell. That can be paid for out of the proceeds of the sale. Number 2, escrow. Number 3, title insurance. Number 4, my friend Christy. Number 4, transfer taxes. In LA County or any county in the state, you will pay $1.10 per thousand as a tax. They tax you on everything in this crazy place. As a tax to sell. They're going to charge you a tax. You've been paying property taxes all this time, which are very high, but now you have to pay a tax to sell the property. And if you sell the property in a city like LA or other cities that have their own private transfer taxes, you have to pay a city tax. LA, the county of Los Angeles charges $1.10 for anywhere to the county that you pay in taxes for the privilege of selling the property. But if it's in the city of LA, you have to pay an additional $4.50 a thousand to sell that property. And they're trying to raise that right now, by the way, in case you haven't heard. So the bottom line is they're going to get you coming and they're going to get you going and everything in between. But technically, that's a one-time tax to sell. Therefore, that tax can come out of the proceeds of your sale without any taxable liability to you. There's recording fees. You have to pay to record the documents at the county recorder. If you're going to do a 1031 exchange, my fee is going to be paid from the proceeds of the sale. That is allowable. There's no tax to that. All these are non-recurring closing costs. Oh, I didn't mention the last one. Any contractual agreement between seller and buyer for repair. So for example, if the buyer is asking the seller to fix something or multiple things, and the seller agrees to it, they can pay for that out of the proceeds of the sale. Anything the buyer requests, because it's a contractual condition of sale. That make sense? Okay. So here's a good example. You bought it for 300, but now you're selling it for $1 million. Wish you had bought more, right? You're selling for $1 million. Now, your non-recurring cost that can be paid for out of that $1 million is $70,000. Your net is $930,000. Ladies and gentlemen, in this example, $930,000 is the minimum new purchase price to buy your new property, or multiple properties. If you're going to buy more than one, you need to cumulatively buy for $930,000 or greater. And all the cash from the sale must go into the purchase of the replacement property. See, a lot of you thought it was over $1 million, like $1 million or $1,001 or greater. Not true. $930,000 is the minimum. Number 2, but if you are paying off loans, a first, a second, a HELOC, line of credit, whatever is against the property in terms of loans, then those loans must be paid off. So if there's, let's say in this example on number 4, there's a $400,000 cumulative loan payoff of all the debt against your property, that leaves you from the $930,000 only $530,000. Now, as the accommodator, we will hold either the $930,000 because you have no debt, or the $530,000 after debt has been paid. And then we will put that money into a client trust account But from that client trust account, it's going to go into the new purchase escrow for EMD money and to close the acquisition. That's why we'll be able to give you a verification form of the either the 930 or the 530 in this example that we are holding for your client. So the new minimum purchase price is 930. But to get into the 930, all the cash from the 530 that we're holding must go into the purchase. And if you paid off $400,000 under number 4 of debt, you are required to borrow the $400,000. Let me show you what that looks like when you go to reborrow. You either get a new loan from a lender, or you bring in $400,000 of cash if you have it in the bank or wherever. You can replace the loan that you're supposed to reborrow from the sale on the purchase with new cash and not have to borrow at all, because new cash is allowed to be put into the purchase at the time of the purchase, not after, not the day after, but at the time of the purchase. New cash can go into escrow to replace the $400,000 of debt, and that's good mortgage replacement as far as the IRS is concerned. Or the seller can carry back for you. Or you could assume the seller's loan. You could even take it subject to. Or any combination of any of these bullet points of replacing mortgage debt. The government will accept any one of these, but your goal is to do what? Replace the $400,000 of debt, to replace all the cash, number 5, that the accommodator is holding for you. 530 plus 400 equals 930. Same as the sales price, number 1 minus number 2, non-recurring closing costs, which equals number 3, 930. That's how a 1031 exchange works. We will, like I said, move the EMD money. That's not a problem. If the client is in escrow or opens escrow before the sale closes, now we have no EMD money yet. We're still waiting for the sale to close. So the client then must put in their own personal EMD money into escrow and then ask escrow for a refund of that when the purchase closes. And that is totally allowable. That is not boot or taxable. That is totally allowable. Remember that money that the accommodator is going to hold needs to be in a client trust account. Never commingled. Never. Those are the easiest. The commingled accounts are the easiest ones for hackers to steal from. They hack escrow companies. They hack exchange companies. They hack title companies. Your accommodator must not put this in a commingled or a corporate account of their own. It must be in a client trust account. Next, if for any money to leave that account, the client must sign a written authorization and submit it to the accommodator, because the accommodator's got to know it's from that client. It's not somebody who's pretending to be that client. And to find out, they have to call them back to make sure, was that really you who just sent us a request, and can you tell us what it was about? The client will know because they just sent it in. And we'll make sure that if it is them, it will be wired directly that same business day, or if it's too late in the afternoon where all the wirings, federal wires are shut down for the rest of the day, first thing in the morning tomorrow. Very important. Next, they need to have good bonding, errors and omissions insurance, good attorneys in-house who specialize in the 1031 exchange. Well, it's time to end this. I wish I had more time to go over some of these subjects that I'm just passing by right now, but I want to end with this. These are all kinds of questions and that we give you answers with the 20 different marketing letters we have available to give to you today. If you're really serious about the next 60 days that you're in, into 2023, so that you can take care of your family by being able to get new listings, by being able to put those listings into escrow, and then maybe even helping them with the replacement property to buy that. That's 2 escrows, folks. Or maybe a referral fee if they're going out of state or out of area. Those are all provide you the letters that can help you as you begin the process of developing a relationship with your clients. When it comes to greater cash flow and how do you improve it? How do you improve your appreciation? You don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? So when the markets go back up again, they can appreciate with multiple properties, not just one. How about depreciation? How about reducing stress and time by going into other types of properties if they don't want to manage anymore? What if they want out of residential? They want to get a triple net property that Starbucks is their tenants, or Trader Joe is their tenant, or Chick-fil-A is their tenant, whoever it happens to be. Folks, those properties are out there, and there's no more management for the client if that's what they want to exchange into. It reduces the stress and time that they have managing properties, but they don't want to pay taxes, so they can do a 1031 exchange. What about diversifying, not putting all their eggs in one basket, but into multiple baskets in multiple places? How about the way to hold title so you can get that stepped up basis when you pass on for your heirs? And how do you minimize the tax burden for your heirs? What is your annual rate of return on your property? Remember we talked about the higher the equity, the lower the rate of return. I've got a flyer for that where they can put in their own numbers to determine what the rate of return. Well, unfortunately, our time's up. But if you'd like those letters, you can send me an email to philatwan@gmail.com, or I already put it in the chat room. It's right there. If you want them, there's no obligation or anything like that. I just want you to know, if you really want to work with investors, those letters are there, and my phone number is up there right under my name in the blue banner. I'm happy to answer your clients' questions. Yes, I will. It's important to know that you've got a partner who can explain this to your clients and not make them feel obligated to do business. Our goal is to support you by helping your client. Whether it's an email, whether it's a phone call, we're happy to have a chat with them. And you can reach me at that number, and that's my email on the bottom. Well, Freddie, I hope this has been helpful to you. Not to you, you already know most of this, but to your agents. And again, just a reminder, next Thursday, not this week, but next week, Dennis Rosas is going to have us on the company-wide thing. It won't be as long. This is a little more informative, but if you would like to go back and watch this, Freddie's going to send me a copy of this recording, and you as well, if you'd like it. But I just want to say thank you to you, Freddie. You're a good man. And the
Thank
bottom
you.
line is, I wish you all the best of the upcoming holidays, and Happy New Year.